Hello and welcome back to Rob's PC Workshop. Today we're going to be working in Packet Tracer. We're going to be designing and addressing a topology. So I want you to start out by designing your network, and I went ahead and did that and typed out the commands we're going to use throughout the program here. So we'll have our R1 devices and our serial ports and the IP addresses. We're going to have three main networks: 192.168.8, 192.168.9, and 192.168.10, and then those are going to each be subnetted into two subnets, as you can see, the dot 0 network and the dot 128 network. So I've got it all typed out, the printers, so we can configure our network here. So we'll go ahead and go to, and like I said, we've figured out our subnets. So we're going to go ahead and start assigning to R1, R1 to the R2, and assign subnet 1 to the R2 LAN. So we're going to go ahead and go to our R1 router. R1 command line interface. And we're going to interface our serial ports and assign them IP addresses and save everything. Okay. So we did router 1. Now we want to go ahead and move to router 2. Configure it for the two subnetted networks. And as you can see, we've everything, since we need 120 hosts for each network, we've got 128 available, so we have a broadcast and a network address, and that allows us two actually additional networks open that we're not using, but that's not really a lot of room for movement. So normally I wouldn't recommend setting it up like this. You would want to give yourself a little more room. But for this, it's basically teaching us how to subnet out networks, so it's a good exercise. As you can see, our states are turning to up because we're configuring our equipment correctly for our network. And this is a really good way to do it in Notepad. Because then you can see and adjust. You know, give yourself a good plan before you jump into your work. Alrighty. So now we've assigned our subnets to our routers, and we want to go ahead and move to the next part. Assign and configure IP addresses on the network devices. So we're going to go to router 1, configuration. Go to Excuse me. So we want to assign and configure the addresses on R1 router. So we want to configure the hosts here. Assign and configure the first valid host on R1, R2 WAN, subnet on the S00 interface. So we're going to go to host A. Configure its gateway and DNS or IP address. So we'll go to assign the IP address 192.168.8.130. Subnet mask of 255.255.128. Subnet mask of 255.255.255.128, the one we're using a lot. Then we have our gateway of 192.168.8.129. Okay. And alright, then go ahead and do host B. Gateway 129. Configure our addresses. 192.168.8.131. And the 128. Okay. Okay. Let's host B 131. Alright. Looks like those settings took effect. Printer. The 129 network still. And we're on the printer, so we want 132 here. Printer A. Okay. Looks like those settings took effect. So we'll go ahead and move to host C. And host C is the 133. Okay. Looks like those settings took effect. And then host D. Host D is 134 address. Alright, moving right along here. Looks like we've configured that network with the right addresses. We'll go ahead and move on to the next network. The R3 network. So R3 host A. And this is the .9.129 gateway. So being that that's the gateway, our first usable address is 130. And moving right along, host B. So host B is the .9.131. Alright. Printer B, .9.132. Alright, keep moving along here. Host C, we've given it the address 192.168.9.133. Okay. And host D, and host D, R3 host D, 134. Alright, now that network is configured correctly. We're going to go ahead and move over here to our R4 network. This is the .10.129 gateway on this network. Alright, the printer, 132. Alright. Now the host 4, excuse me, host C, 133. And host D. And as you notice, it keeps telling you this address already exists. So it won't let you reuse static IP addresses, which is a really handy feature. So now we need to configure router EIGRP on each of our routers. So router 1, command line interface. We're going to configure it for the 3 networks, the .8 network, the .9, and the .10 network. And then again, like I said, they're each subnetted into 2, .8, .0.8.128.9.0.9.128, and then .10.0.10.128. So R1 needs to be configured. Okay. Router 2, we need EIGRP also on that. Okay. That's router 2. Router 3. And then assign router 4 with router EIGRP. Alright, and I must have missed something along the way. I'm going to go ahead and see here what I missed. Port router 3. Apparently 000 just didn't work correctly, so we're going to go back to router 3. Go back in our log. Ooh, I see here. Too many S's. Can't do that. Let's go ahead and configure that correctly. So we're in our configuration mode. So we're going to interface serial 000. And looks like it's just confused with our save there. Okay. One more check here. What are we missing? R4 host A. Host A is incorrectly configured. So let's go to R4 host A and see how it's configured. R4 host A. It's really nice in this that it can show us how we're incorrectly configured. Because in the real world you don't quite have that luxury. So looks like we have, whoops, R4 host A 192.168.10.130 IP address, and 192.9.129. What? No, why does it keep putting me? R4 host A is the .10.129. Alright. Alright, well that took effect. So, little minor typing in errors, and that's very common, so you got to watch for that. But that's the beautiful thing about having your network set up previous. You can go ahead and look and say, oh, okay, this is where I went wrong. So that's basically setting up a network and subnetting it. So I hope that's been helpful. Have a nice day.